this session. How many of you are serving in some kind of youth ministry capacity? You are a leader, so almost all of you, some of you kind of maybe, okay. How many of you like teenagers? Are we good? Okay, one person, cool. So we're all serving in youth ministry, but only 2 of us like teenagers, so let's start there. Okay. So the bunch of different, roles that probably are represented in this room, right? So some of you maybe are full-time vocational student ministry, this is your focus. Some of you maybe part-time or bivocational. Some of you volunteer, serving as the leader, like the volunteer youth pastor in your setting. Some of you maybe serving as a small group leader, a lot of different things. So I want to talk and kind of illustrate this to you for you here in this session. I want to talk about one of the things that I think is probably one of the most pressing issues that's happening in current youth culture, in Gen Z culture, and really even outside of that generation in American culture. And it is our culture's obsession with discovering one's identity. And you probably have thought about this, you've heard about this, you've talked about this, right? And it's just kind of like this never-ending, elusive search out there, especially among our young people, of like, I got to figure out who I am. A couple years ago, many years ago actually, when our kids were young, I mentioned we got 3 kids. Our oldest is now married. And I forgot to mention the most important thing, and that is that last year, my wife and I became grandparents. Woo! We grandparent status in the house. Okay, little baby Heather James joined our family in August of last year, and so we were excited about that. But when our kids were young, we started a Christmas tradition. Most families have their Christmas traditions. One of ours was that on the Christmas morning we would read the Christmas story, and we would not only read it, but we would reenact it with our Fisher-Price Baby Jesus manger set, right? And you got all the characters, you got the camels and the goats and the sheep and the wise men and the angels. And so as one of us, parents, is reading the story, the other one and the kids, as they got older, were taking the pieces, and the wise men arrived and all this stuff. But our tradition was that when we retold the Christmas story, baby Jesus was always missing, right? He just wasn't there because he was hidden somewhere in the house. And once we were done telling the Christmas story, it was an all-out scavenger hunt, search the house, whichever one of the kids finds baby Jesus the first, they get to open the first present of Christmas, right? And so, boy, this tradition just grew and grew and grew, and it was just so much fun. So one year, it was maybe about 2 weeks before Christmas, I observed some really frantic and nervous-like behavior in my wife, because she is just incessantly cleaning the house, which, not that our house isn't clean, but that's not normal behavior for her. And finally I was like, what are you doing? Like, what is going on? And she's just like, she says to me, she's like, I lost baby Jesus. I didn't really understand like exactly where we were at in the conversation. All of the, like, you guys understand that sometimes your wife starts a conversation with you in mid-sentence in for you, but for her, she's already been thinking about it. And I'm like, like, you need to pray, you're backsliding, like, what is? She's like, no, I lost baby Jesus, Christmas baby Jesus, Fisher-Price baby Jesus. I'm like, you hid him already? And she's like, yes, and I can't remember where I hid him at. And I'm like, baby, like, the rule is we do this together. And she's like, I know, I just got so excited about Christmas this year, and so I hid him, and now I can't remember where I hid him. We gotta find baby Jesus. She's like, because if I can't find him, then how's a 5-year-old supposed to find him? So for the next several hours, me and my wife are frantically looking for baby Jesus all over the house, and my wife, God bless her, like, she's an incredible prayer warrior, and so I overhear at one point her praying prayers that sound like this: oh, baby Jesus, reveal yourself to us. And I'm like, baby, I don't even think, this is not theologically correct. Like, I don't know what is happening here. And I get frustrated, and so she catches me staring at my phone at one point. And she kind of like, she's like, what are you doing? She's like, what are you staring at your phone for? Like, we're supposed to find baby Jesus. And I'm like, I did find baby Jesus on eBay, and I ordered him overnight shipping. I saved Christmas, right? So, second baby Jesus arrives. We hide him together. On the morning of Christmas, my wife, she's like, you know there's 2 baby Jesuses hidden. She's like, this could cause lots of theological confusion for the kids if they happen to find both baby Jesuses. Like, did Jesus have a brother? Like, what's going on? You know, all this. It took my wife like 3 months to find the original baby Jesus. It was just crazy. But this whole like idea of like searching, right? It's what I think of when I think of what's happening in culture and what's happening with our young people. So what I want to do is I want to illustrate it with this stack of boxes over here, and then I want to give you I want to juxtapose it with a different way. And here's a central text in Scripture that you can, if you're taking notes or if you just want to kind of think through this. So Jesus, in Matthew chapter 7, he finishes the Sermon on the Mount, right? So this is Jesus' first sermon, right? Some might arguably say his most like in-depth message that he preaches, right? Matthew 5, 6, and 7. He ends in Matthew 7 with the story that you and I know so well: the wise man builds his house upon the rock, right? And I'll just paraphrase the text. Jesus says, anyone who hears these words of mine, obviously he's referring to Matthew 5, 6, and 7. If you hear these words and you build your life on these words, then you build your house on the rock. And then he goes on and he says something that you and I tend to not like, but he goes on and says, when the rain comes and the storm comes and the wind blows, the house did not fall. This is one of Jesus' ways of saying to you and I, in this world you will have trouble. Right. You will have storms. You will have challenges. And Jesus is in a sense saying, if you want to build a life that can withstand the pressures of this world, build it on my words. And then he juxtaposes that and he says, but if you hear these words of mine and you don't do this, and you're like a foolish man, then you build your house on the sand. And when the same rain falls and the same wind blows and the same storm comes, that guy's house is going to fall. Maybe Jesus is referring to two different dudes building their house or their life in two different ways. Maybe Jesus is referring to one dude who built it wrong the first time, had it collapse, had to rebuild it right the second time, right? Either way, the point is clear. Jesus is saying there's a way in which you and I should build our lives. In the context of student ministry, let me frame it this way. There's a way in which you and I should not only model, but teach how students should build their lives. Let me unpack for you, this is just how I see it. Let me unpack for you how I would suggest culture, current American culture, is instructing our students to build their life, and it's represented with this stack of boxes here, and it's represented with the words that are on this stack of boxes. You can take a picture of this if you want, or you can write it down. I'm just going to give you a couple thoughts. I'm going to go through these pretty fast. So culture would say this. Again, this is not biblical. This is not what Jesus would say. This is culture. When I say culture, I'm meaning the way that our American thought process is. Right. The things that we think, the things we see, what we hear in our music, our media, so on and so on. Culture says, build your life on feelings. Build your identity on feelings. Right? Culture would say it like this. I am what I feel. Right? So if you're looking for a simple definition for each one of these boxes, I'll give you one. Culture would say, I am what I feel. I am the sum total of my feelings. The opposite way you could say it is, I feel, therefore I am. So my existence as a person, or my identity as a person, will be purely based out of the fact that I have feeling, that I have emotion. Right? And so you hear this in culture in a lot of our phrasing, and even a lot of the words that we use or sentences that we use. So you'll hear this kind of idea in phrases like this, like, you do you, boo. Right. Like, Jesus, just be yourself, right? Just, you know what, honey, just follow your heart, right? Follow your heart, right? Just like or here's the other really, really popular phrase, like, just, you know what, just go live your truth, right? All of those phrases. Right? I mean, sometimes we can even say that. All of those phrases really stem from culture's belief that my identity is going to be primarily based out of a foundation of my feelings. And so the lie of culture, but really it's the promise of culture, but it's a lie. The lie of culture is this. You and I will never be happy. You'll never have joy. You'll never have peace. You'll never have contentment. You'll never really have purpose in your life, unless you really own your feelings and discover what they are. So now you have a generation of students that are really focused on, like, I gotta understand my feelings, right? I am what I feel. But then it moves on to I am what or who I'm attracted to. Right? And so now culture says you need to combine your feelings and your sexuality together. And when you put those together and you get a little bit of clarity on what those are and where those feelings and where those attractions will lead you, this is going to determine a very foundational part of one's identity. So if feelings say, I am what I feel, right? Or I feel, therefore I am, then attraction says, I am whatever I'm attracted to, or whoever I'm attracted to. And so you have students now, and many students now will wrestle with feelings of same-sex attraction. Right. And that becomes very confusing to them, right? Why is that confusing? Well, because their identity is based on feelings. And now, all of a sudden, they start to have feelings of attraction to someone of the same gender. And what culture says is this. Culture says, if you're feeling it, then it automatically equates to identity. Right? We jump past any other steps in the process there's no sense of filtering, there's no sense of like Christian worldview to look through, there's no sense of like, well, let me take my feelings and my attractions and compare them with the biblical truth, right? It's just this, well, that must be who I am. And so when you have a student who, in your ministry who, even if they were to just share openly with you and say, man, I'm struggling with some same-sex attractions, things like that, there's probably a good bet that student has already gone online, done some kind of like test online, and where it's all feelings-based and attractions-based questions, and then it's just kind of spit out and said, oh, you're homosexual, or you're a lesbian. And so then students feel like, oh, I need to embrace it. Then they have a conversation with one of their friends, and their friends will say to them, you just need to pursue that. That's just who you are, right? Some of you are nodding your head because you've had these kind of conversations with your students. So I feel, therefore I am. I am the sum total of my feelings. I am whatever I'm attracted to. Now we've taken a biblical understanding of our identity found in the declaration that we are the son of God or the daughter of God, and we've reduced it down to one sexual preference. Right. That's what culture has done. Right. I feel, therefore I am. I am whatever I'm attracted to. And then there's achievement. So achievement says this: I am whatever I'm good at. I'm the sum total of my skills. I'm the sum total of my intellect. I'm the sum total of my athletic ability, right? I'm the sum total of whatever my talent is, in life. So my identity in large part will come from whatever I'm good at and whatever I can accomplish or achieve with that skill or that talent, right? So the lie of achievement is that I am no better of a person than my greatest moment or my greatest achievement, but I'm no worse than my worst moment. Right. I'm somewhere in the middle. So I'm as good as the last trophy that I earned. I'm as good as the amount of trophies, if you're an adult, listen, I'm framing all this in the world of like being a student ministry, but you and I as adults know we wrestle with all this stuff all the time. Because as adults, it's like, well, I'm no better than the initials after my name and the most recent degree that I got, or I'm no better than how many zeros I have in the bank account, right? Right? I'm no better than my title. I'm no better than my most recent position. So we think about, I'm no better than, I haven't bought a house yet. I have whatever it is. So students wrestle with this at a student level in the same way that we wrestle with it at an adult level. I am what I feel. I am whatever I'm attracted to. I am whatever I'm good at. And then this one here, approval. I am what others approve of. I am what others will affirm. Or I am not what others will not approve of. And so for students, and this is probably true for adults, but for students, this one right here, where this has like some significant pros and some significant cons depending on one's family life. Because if a student is raised in a really good, healthy family, then they might have had really good, healthy biblical approval in their life, right? But if a student is raised in a terrible family, which I would suggest to you is probably at least 50% of the students in your ministry come from either a broken family, meaning they only have one parent, or a highly dysfunctional family, right? They have both parents, but it's not healthy. And so you have students that walk around all day long emotionally craving the need for approval. Right. And that desire for approval is like, it magnetically attracts them to any other person, relationship, friend, or people group that will approve and affirm of them in whatever it is that they're feeling, right? Add it all up. I am what I feel. I am what I'm attracted to. I am what I'm good at. I am what others have approved of me. This is my identity. I am whatever I say I am. Right? This is culture's recipe here. Right? This is what culture says. Now, let me pause here for a second. I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to walk you through a biblical way as I see it, for one to build their identity. And then we're going to talk about some of the tensions that exist between these two. But let me pause right here, because I think I need to insert a thought here. Feelings are not necessarily bad. Right? Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, absolutely.
Attraction should be, can be a good thing. Right? When a mommy and a daddy really love one another. Okay, we don't have to go there, right? Okay, good. I just checking. So it's like one person agreed. I was like, okay, all right. Is it bad to achieve something in your life?
No.
No. Is it bad to receive approval in a healthy form in your life? No. So all of these things, in moderation, can be really good things. In fact, I would suggest that all of these things are actually, in their purest, healthier form, gifts from God, right? Right? But what culture does is what the enemy of our soul has always done. He's a counterfeiter. He's a manipulator. He's not a creator. And so he takes what God made that was good, and he manipulates and he counterfeits all of it. Right? And he gives us counterfeit versions of all these things. I'm not okay with a lot of counterfeit versions of my life. Diet Coke, that's a counterfeit. No. Decaf coffee, that is a counterfeit. That is, okay. Don't, I'll preach. Vegetarian bacon. Who thought of that? Don't even get me started on country music. I'll go there next. I'm just, okay. Okay, now come over here, and here we have words that all relate to biblical understanding of identity. And so let me just walk you through each one of these. And again, take a picture, write it down, whatever. And I'm going to give you some different references for each one of these. And there's probably a lot of different references that you could use. Okay, so Jesus said, "Foolish man builds his life on the sand. Storms in life come, knocks him over." Jesus said, "Wise man builds his house on the rock. The same storms will come, but his house doesn't stand." By the way, one of our great distinctives in being a follower of Christ is not that we don't go through storms, is that we go through storms and we come out the other side.
Exactly.
We all went through COVID. We all went through the pandemic, right? It's the way in which our life is built. That's why this issue of identity is so important in how we help young people form it. And at the very end here, I'm going to give you some thoughts on how we teach and preach identity in a very, very significant biblical way. Okay, so truth. Very problematic word in today's culture. We don't like truth. We don't like the idea of absolute truth. Biblical truth, absolute truth. I would define that as truth that is for all people, in all places, at all times. Culturally, not okay with that. Culturally, we've decided that if we're going to use the word truth, we either need to put the word my in front of it or your. My truth, your truth. We really are not okay with the word the truth, as if there is a form of truth or someone who defines truth outside of my own preferences. Right? Right? Biblically, you and I would say, there's really no such thing as your truth or my truth. There's the truth, and then there's your opinion and my opinion.
That's right.
Right? When I talk truth here's two central truths that students have to understand if they're going to begin to build their life with a biblical identity. Here's truth number one. The Bible says, I am made in the image of God. I'm made in the image of God. In the image of God. Not in the image of my feelings, my attractions, my achievement, or my approval. I'm made in the image of God. That's completely different. Right? I'm made in the image of God. That's truth number one. Truth number two is that an extension. We add an extension to the first phrase. I am made in the image of God, yet I am a fallen image bearer. Right? What does that mean? That means I have a sin nature. That means I'm messed up. Look at your neighbor and say, he's talking about you right now. All right? That means, that speaks to my depravity. Right? My sin nature. Right? This is everything that Paul talks about in Romans chapter 1. Right? I no longer have patience for youth pastors who think that our students can't understand theology. Our kids are sitting in schools learning AP English and AP Algebra and math and geometry and calculus and every other math out there that I never took because I wasn't smart enough, But like our kids are in class all day long learning this stuff, And we're afraid as youth pastors and youth leaders to have deep theological discussion about sin nature and Romans chapter 1, 2, and 3 and depravity and what it means in Romans 1 when God says, I gave them over to their lustful thinking. I gave them over to a depraved way of thinking, a depraved mind. Right? We have to unpack truth for students so that it becomes a foundation and an anchor and a compass in their life. Why is that so important? Let's just talk about one tension that happens right here. What does a student typically do when the truth of God's word disagrees with what they're feeling? That's a moment of tension. What do you and I do? I mean, let's bring it home for a second. Right? Like, it is easy to follow your feelings. It is easy for you and I, even as adults, to say, well, I might know what the truth is, but I'm still feeling this over here. How do I do this? Right? One of the things that I say to students a lot, and this is not a magic word. You can write it down. I think it's a good advice for students, but it's not a magic word that's just going to like seal their identity forever. But I say this to students all the time. If you trust your feelings for instruction, it will lead you to destruction.
That's right.
Right? Really good. Feelings are a great shotgun rider in your life. They're a terrible driver.
That's right.
Right? Feelings are a great servant. They're a terrible master. Right? We have to understand the students. We have to teach students how to say, you know what, when I'm dealing with feelings and emotions, I have to be willing, if I want to be a follower of Christ, right? If I want to be a Christian, then I have to be willing to surrender my feelings to truth, to biblical truth. That's called lordship, right? That theologically, that's what you and I would call sanctification, the process of becoming more like Christ, right? And so this creates a tension for our students, because students live in a culture that, what does it say? Embrace your feelings, follow your heart. You do you, boo. Right? Wait a second. Wait a second, youth pastor. You want me to surrender my feelings to truth? That's so offensive. Like, and then you and I are sitting there thinking like, it's all throughout the Bible. Jesus says, take up your cross, deny yourself, follow me. I mean, this is every part of what Jesus preaches and teaches and even models ultimately in his death. He models. Jesus himself in the garden, what does he say? Lord, could you take this from me, but not my will? Right? What's he talking about? Not my feelings.
That's right.
But your will be done. So we have to teach truth. We have to teach truth. I'm made in the image of God, but we also have to teach truth. I'm made in the image of God, but I'm a fallen image bearer. Right? John 14:6, Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, right? So Jesus is the one who is the ultimate definition of truth, right? Next right here, love. Students have to understand God's love. You could also insert or exchange this word with the word grace, right? God's love, grace, his unmerited favor towards us, a gift that you and I don't deserve, that we could never earn. What's a good scripture to go with this one? Romans chapter 5, verse 8. While we were still sinners, Christ showed his great love for us, right? That he died for us. So when I was lost in my fallenness, or when I was lost in pursuing my feelings or pursuing my attractions, even in my worst moment, what did Christ do? He showed his great love for us. What is happening in this moment when a student receives this? They realize, I am deeply loved. I am significantly loved. It also speaks to their need for this up here. Because if you feel deep love by this, then you're able, as a student or an adult, you're able to say, I am deeply loved and fully accepted. Right? Well, see, this is what culture says about identity. Culture says you got to become. You got to be somebody. And biblically, the answer or the antidote to that is you don't have to become somebody. You already belong. You're already in, friend. You're already chosen. Right? You're not the last kid in the dodgeball line in elementary school. You're God's first round draft pick, friend. Right? He already picked you. You belong. I'm jumping ahead, but you are deeply loved. And that models for a student what real, genuine love looks like, not this counterfeit version of attraction that students oftentimes get caught up in. Yeah. Right? There's tension here, though, because what do I do? Right? Serving. Mark chapter 10, verse 45. The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. There it is again. Jesus saying, I'm going to give it all away. You see, this is where we teach, but we also model to students that true contentment, true happiness, true purpose in their life will primarily be found when they serve other people. Right. This over here, this is all about self-centeredness, self-absorption. What do I need to do to make myself feel good? What do I need to do to achieve something for myself so that I have some sense of identity, right? I got the scholarship. I got the starting role on the team. I set the record. I got the lead in the musical. I got the followers on TikTok. It's all happening for me, right? This is all about achieve. Now, look at the difference here. Look at the difference. Biblically speaking, you and I never really achieve identity. We receive identity. We receive it through what Jesus did in serving us as a ransom for many, right? And it's only when we teach and model with our own lives, it's only when we teach students what it means to serve others that they begin to have a life that emulates Christ, putting others first, right? So my identity is not wrapped up and I got to achieve. My identity is wrapped up and I've already received. I've received love and I've received what God did as a ransom for many. And now I've received a model for life, right? A model that says, this is how I should live life. Belonging, right? The Apostle Paul breaks this down for us in Ephesians. I think it's chapter 1, verses 4 and 5. I think I got that right. And he says in Ephesians chapter 1, 4 and 5 that God chose us to adopt us as his heirs. And Paul's using this interesting word, adopt, and Jewish culture didn't really understand the concept of adoption. It wasn't really something that they significantly took part in. But the Greek culture or the Roman culture did. And the Roman culture understood that the word adopt had significant legal implications to it. Whereas you were legally permitted to abandon a natural born child, you were not legally permitted to abandon one that you had chosen to adopt. And the moment that the legal proceedings of adoption had been finalized, the child that was adopted had any debt associated with their original family name erased, immediately received the new name of the family, and also immediately became an heir with all rights associated with being an heir in that family and any inheritance attached to that. You're smart enough to get all the spiritual implications of what I'm talking about right now. Teaching students, I already belong, right? I don't need another person's approval when I've already received the ultimate approval from God. He chose me already. Last one here. Purpose. This is Romans chapter 8, verse 29 and 30, I think. But it's definitely Romans chapter 8. It says that before time, before the foundations of the world,
Thank you, Father.
He purposed to mold us or make us into the image of Christ. So I'm not even talking about purpose in the sense of like, oh, you have a unique calling in your life. You're going to be a pastor, missionary. You're going to be a teacher. You're going to be an engineer, entrepreneur, right? No. I'm not talking about that like a unique calling for life. I'm talking about a much more foundational purpose in all of our lives. You and I said it earlier, you and I would know this to be the doctrine of sanctification, the process of becoming like Christ, right? God's greatest purpose for you and I is not really wrapped up in my job or my career, right? It's not really wrapped up in all of the titles that I might accomplish or achieve in my life or the promotions or any of those things. It's ultimately wrapped up in me becoming more like Christ.
Amen.
Okay, now let's talk about some tensions here in the last couple minutes that we have here. There's some tensions here between this and between this. And there's some deeply problematic things about students and even adults building their life this way. Number one, and I'm going to give you a list here, and you can kind of write these down. I'll go through these pretty quickly. Number one, this is what I would call incoherent. I'm borrowing a thought here from Tim Keller. Tim Keller says this is incoherent. Incoherent meaning this doesn't make sense. Why does this not make sense? It ultimately doesn't logically make sense to build your life this way because these things, but especially these two down here, are constantly changing.
Right?
I mean, just never, ever, goodness gracious, you wake up one day and you feel one way and then you have a cup of coffee and you're great. I mean, just real talk, right? I'm just thinking that these things are constantly changing, and so it's like sometimes you're like, what is wrong with me? My feelings don't even agree with my feelings right now, right? So reasoning one's way to some form of identity through this model is incoherent, right? It's like reasoning with a cat lover. You're never going to make sense of that person. It's just not. Sorry, I got all the cat lovers in the room, right? I'm just, okay. So, she laughs, she loves all my jokes. She needs to be with me every time I speak, right? All the time. Okay, so this is incoherent. Secondly, this is elusive. This creates elusive searching in our lives. This is my wife looking for baby Jesus lost in the house. This is what culture is saying. Culture is saying, just look deep down inside of you and eventually you'll find it. That is not what culture even means. Let me tell you what culture really means. Just look deep down inside of you and find a version of yourself that we will approve of.
Come on.
And oh, by the way, if you don't come out with a version of yourself we approve with, then we're going to cancel you. So this is elusive. This really doesn't exist, even though culture says that it does. This is incoherent. This is the elusive. This creates tremendous insecurity in a person's life. You want to know why you teenage girls are always insecure? Because they're all wrapped up in their bag and they're all wrapped up in the feelings and chasing all those things, right? This creates insecurity. Why? Because it creates suffocating pressure on me doing whatever I need to do in order to feel whatever I want to feel. So I need approval. So I'll run to that guy. I need to achieve something in my life. So I'll try to make this happen, or I'll finally, I need someone's approval. I'll try to get the grade. Then maybe my parents will be happy. This just creates panic and insecurity. And what American culture has prescribed as the remedy to things like peace, joy, happiness, and contentment actually is the culprit for why kids have such high levels of panic and anxiety and depression and discouragement today. You know, Gen Z kids, the most recent article I read said that Gen Z kids, and this was pre-COVID, I just filled in a bingo slot on Jordan's Ignite bingo board. Gen Z students, the most recent article I read pre-COVID said that the average Generation Z student has a stress level that is equivalent to insane asylum patients of the 1970s. This is in part why. Because we built a life that creates tremendous panic and insecurity. So this is incoherent. This is elusive. This is insecurity. This creates great instability in one's life, right? Or you could just say it's unstable. I mean, just kind of like it's unstable, right? All of my former Lego champs, like, you don't build a tower this way, right? Some of you go back to Lincoln Log days. I can see it. And right. But you don't build it. You don't build it this way. You don't build it this way, right? So here's the question: can this stand? Let me ask it a different way. Is it currently standing? Yeah. Let me ask the question this way then: can this withstand?
No, absolutely not.
That's what Jesus is saying in Matthew 7. Jesus is saying, you can get away with building your life this way for a little bit.
Right.
This will work on your good days.
Right.
This will work when there's not a lot of storms, there's not a lot of wind, there's not a lot of rain in your life. This will work. This will never withstand. This will never withstand what you're going to face in this world. Whether you're an adult, whether you're a student, this will never withstand. This is instability. This is unstable. Let me give you one last one, and I'll just cap this with some deeper theological thoughts here for a second. This, when fully lived out, is idolatry. This is identity idolatry right here. Tim Keller said it like this. He said, when you and I take what is good and we make it the ultimate, it becomes idolatry.
Right.
I said it earlier, but all of these things can be and should be good. So the remedy to all of this is not to say to students, You shouldn't feel anything. You should never have attraction. You don't need anyone's approval. You don't need to achieve anything in your life. Go ahead and cash in that 0.0 GPA. Who cares? No. That's not the remedy to any of this. The remedy to this is I have to embrace these things as good, but not ultimate.
That's right.
And we have a current generation of students that have so bought into this model right here that they're living out idolatry in their heart because they've made identity the idol. They've made feelings the idol. They've made attraction, achievement, approval the idol, the highest form of worship, what their heart craves for the most, right? That's what idolatry is in our hearts, right? Idolatry in my heart is anything that I desire or want or worship more than I desire or want to worship Jesus. So this is idolatry. If I wanted to put it into the perspective of a worldview, this is what I would call humanism. Humanism is a worldview that places man or mankind at the center of thought process. And it says, ultimately, I'm paraphrasing a lot here, but just to get to the core of humanistic worldview. Humanistic worldview basically says, deep down inside, all of us are really good people. The exact opposite of what we're talking about over here with sin nature and depravity.
Exactly.
Deep down inside, we're really good people, and if we put good people in the right circumstances, then good will come out of it. That stands in stark contrast to the truth of God's word, though, doesn't it?
Yes.
Because God's word says, no, you're not good.
Yes.
Actually, you're a sinner. Actually, you have a sin nature. Actually, when given over to the fullness of your sin nature, it will spiral you all the way to a place of ultimate depravity, right? Right? So, humanism says you're really good, and if you just figure out these things. Okay, now here's some mistakes that we've made. I said all of that to get to the last 5 minutes here, because I want to unpack some thought process for you in the way that you talk about identity, in the way that you disciple students, in the way that you preach and teach for those of you that do that, and in the way that you have conversations with kids. What most Christian students have done, I would even honestly say most even Christian adults have done this. Most Christian adults have taken their life, they built it like this, and then when they met Jesus or got saved and they heard a preacher say, you need to find your identity in Christ, they were like, oh, cool. I'll just throw some Jesus on top of all this. Is Jesus okay with that?
No.
Is Jesus like, yo, cool. Is Jesus ever okay with like, I'm cool to be an add-on? And Jesus has a lot to say about all these things and how these things work in relation to him. Right? And so you wonder why young people struggle with sanctification, the process of becoming like Christ and growing. You wonder why adults struggle with this. You know why? Because you have encounter with Jesus over and over and over again, and none of it can last or turn into transforming power in our life, because ultimately everything inside of us is still built like this. This is why you take, all of you that have ever taken a group of students away to a camp or a retreat or a convention or a conference or whatever, this right here, take a picture of this, see this image in your head. This right here is why you have students that will spend hours at an altar crying their eyes out, and a week later they're right back into the same
Come
thing.
on now. Come on now.
This. All right? Here's a way that you can help students think about it. Jesus is not an app for your life. He's the entire operating system. Like this is everything. So now when you come back over here, right? You come back over here. When students really understand truth, that I'm made in the image of God, and when they really understand that I'm deeply loved by God, and when they really understand that my life should emulate Christ and serving others like he did, and when they understand that not only am I deeply loved, I am fully accepted, and the greatest purpose for my life is to be conformed into the image of Christ, ultimately then what students begin to understand is the greatest worship of my life is actually to fully become like Jesus. This is sanctification in its fullest, right? This is you and I moving from a place of I like Christ to I want to be Christ-like.
Right.
Totally different views here.
Yeah.
Now, here's what we've done in youth ministry. And we're guilty of this. Number one, we've taught an incomplete, shallow gospel. We've taught a version of the gospel that says to students, if you just add Jesus onto the mess of a life that you've created, ultimately he'll take care of all this stuff for you. And our gift of volition and free will doesn't allow it to happen because my free will is still in bondage to all of these gods and idols that I've made. And as much as I want to surrender them to Jesus, I can't. And so we have to begin teaching students the fullness of sanctification, the fullness of sin nature, the fullness of the truths of God's word about who we are and how we're meant to become like Christ. You can't approach like youth ministry any longer with this idea that falls into the camp of Jesus is just an add-on. Is Jesus the guide to your best life, or is he your best life? It's just a totally different way. It's a much deeper understanding of it that we have to present to students, right? Here's another thought. So we haven't preached and taught the fullness of the gospel. Secondly, you and I genuinely include myself in this because I see myself for many years in youth ministry falling into this camp. You and I have taught a reactive gospel. And what I mean by a reactive gospel is I observe in my students all of the ways in which their feelings, attractions, and need for achievement and approval are showing up in their life, on their social media feeds, in the way they treat other people, in the way they handle themselves. And then I preach gospel that reacts to that, rather than preaching a proactive gospel that lays a foundation. Here's a good little phrase that's easy to remember. When you preach to students like this, you're preaching to the fruit. When you preach to students like this, you're preaching to the root.
Oh my goodness.
That's fruit level preaching. This is root level preaching. Right? This is me saying, let's talk about all the crap that's going on your social feed. Let's talk about what's happening, all the drama that's happening in your life. This is me saying, let me try to figure out top 40 Netflix series, everything that's happening, who's famous on TikTok, what's going on Snap. Let me try to just fully embrace the crazy fruit of Gen Z.
Right.
And then try to clip some of that off, or try to take little tiny pieces of fruit that are kind of rotten fruit, and like you should really surrender that to Jesus. That's also what we call behavior modification.
Come on.
That's when you and I take the gospel and we apply it in a way where a student feels like sin in their life is really just a list of do's and don'ts. And they don't understand that sin in their life is ultimately an issue of idolatry in my heart. Right? This is fruit level preaching. This is root level preaching. This is me. I'm going to lay a foundation. I'm going to talk biblical truth. I'm going to talk theological truth. And when I lay that foundation, or when I have conversations at that level, over time, it begins to produce the fruit, long-lasting fruit, that you and I all genuinely want to see in the lives of our students. Right?
Yes.
I have used my time, but there's a little bit of a buffer here. We got about, what, Gil, 2 or 3 minutes at least? So I'm going to stop talking, just kind of like if there's any questions and you can feel free to preach right along with me if you have additional thoughts, but just let me just stop and let me just kick it to you guys. If you have questions and things that we can talk about, I'd love to do that. Anything at all. Tim?
How would you encourage those of us that maybe don't preach to our students on a weekly basis, but maybe our context for youth ministry is more small, more discipleship maybe. So how would you encourage us to be intentional in going more root-based instead of...
Yeah. So I think like this potentially could serve as almost a preaching or teaching or conversational, small group conversational strategy for like your next 3 months or 6 months or even a year of youth ministry. Right? Again, I think this is one of the weaknesses we've been stuck in for decades now, and what I and others have termed the attractional church model. And so the attractional church model has kind of sold us on this idea of tons of topical sermons, right? And topical sermons usually speak to fruit level issues, at least in their branding and their marketing, right? And you can still use that kind of stuff, but ultimately it all has to segue back to what are some core foundational truths here. So I'm Assemblies of God, so I'm going to frame it with Assembly of God theology here. You can put this in your own context if you're in a different denomination. But like in the Assemblies of God, we have what we call the 16 fundamental truths. This right here is fundamental truth number 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right? So that's me as a youth pastor, as a volunteer pastor, as a part-time pastor. That's me saying it's not enough for me to just grab a cool sermon series or a great small group discussion that's very fruit level. I need to be teaching deeper theology. Less theater, more theology. Less attractional. Come see, come see, come see. Let me play to your feelings and emotions to get you to come to our youth ministry. More come and be. This is not this come and see, this is come and be. Become. Come and become more like Christ. Is that right? So you have to wrap your head in your context. So for those of you that have a youth ministry that meets weekly, and maybe you are the main communicator or someone in your church is, it's sitting down for maybe weeks or months or half a year at a time and saying what theological truths, all of these things, where are we going to make sure that we are strategically and intentionally talking about these things, right? If you have a smaller youth ministry context and your youth ministry maybe looks like small group gatherings and no one's really preaching or doing public speaking, that's fine. Actually, it might even be better, to be honest, because kids get the opportunity to process truth and get to talk about it and get to discuss it, right? But it still takes a little bit of strategy on your part. I'll give you one recommendation for a resource that I think is really well done, and in my view falls very much in line with what we're talking about over here. Website is feed.bible. I'm not associated with them. I don't get anything for saying this. I just love them. I love their organization. I love how doctrinally grounded it is. And here's what you're all going to love. All of their small group resources are 100% free. Right? Feed. Yeah, F-E-E-D. Feed.bible. Feed.bible. They have some great resources. They probably have at least a year, if not 2 years worth of really well-written small group guides that in their presentation are very topical or very branded at what I would call like this fruit level attractional side, but in their content very deeply theological, right? But it takes work, it takes strategy. You and I were talking about this the other day, like discipling students takes time, it takes intentionality, it takes people, like one-on-one relationships, right? None of this happens, and Jeannie said it in her session just now. If we were going to win the world through our preaching, this would have worked a long time ago. It would be, you just preached all these things. This will just work, right? It's going to take people. It's going to take like relationship. But it takes more than just like, cool, let's play games, let's watch a movie, let's go do 9 Square. It takes intentionality, right? It takes you and I as leaders saying, I'm being very intentional about leveraging the relationships I have with students to discuss these things here, right? Probably got time for maybe one more question. And if not, that's totally fine. I'm going to be here all day anyways, and so love to connect with you. If you want to connect with me personally, let's do your question real
I
quick.
just want to make a comment.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times I teach 4th and 5th grade boys.
Okay, let's just pause and pray for you really quickly. I'm sorry. God bless you.
It's really important to, like, all of these things that we're talking about. We talk about those for teenagers and that, and a lot of times we forget those younger kids. And
Yeah.
this truth can be put into them,
Yeah.
given to them, just as easily as it can our teens.
And sometimes even more foundationally, right? Because we're forming,
Yeah.
at that age and younger, we're forming their thoughts, right? Yeah, absolutely. So maybe some of you are sitting in the room, like my sister here, and 4th and 5th grade boys, again, we'll pray for you, have a little prayer meeting after here, just lay hands on you. And it only gets worse when they're in 6th and 7th grade, because then they start using Acts, and then it's even worse. But yeah, like children's ministry workers, man, you guys are on the front lines of this, especially when we're talking about like laying the foundation of truth. So, love to connect with you. My name is Eran Holt, and you can just email me, eranholt@gmail.com. My name is spelled ERANHOLT. So that's my email address, my personal email address, so feel free to use that. I'd love to connect with you. If I can help you in any way, obviously you can contact me through our ministry website too, leadthegeneration.com. All of our contact info is on there, and if you're more of a social media person, you can find me on social at the same place, Eran Holt. Love to connect with you. If you're ever looking for a coaching opportunity to be coached in youth ministry, our ministry has about 300 or so youth pastors across the country that we're involved in coaching relationships with. Myself and other coaches that are part of our ministry. We do cohort coaching with online resources and access, and we also do a lot of one-on-one coaching. We have our annual conference coming up this year, August 18th and 19th. It'll be right here at Allison Park Church. There'll be a full live experience for youth pastors and their teams of student leaders and adult leaders. We also have a full online experience for those that want to join us more in a watch party type setting. And so more information about that to come on our website and so on. But God bless you guys. They're starting worship again. It's been so good. Go down there, get ignited, get refreshed, all that stuff. And then there'll be another round of breakouts.